You ever wonder about those noises coming from the apartment next door? The one no one ever seems to live in? Well, let me tell you a story about that, and what happens when curiosity gets the better of you. All right, so let me tell you about this story I heard. It's been stuck in my head ever since. There was this woman named Claire. She lived in apartment 3B, and everything was pretty normal, except for the apartment next door, 3C. Now here's the weird part. No one ever lived there. No moving trucks, no mail, no lights. Nothing. Just a locked door. The landlord would always say, "Oh, it's under renovation." But Claire never saw a single worker. At first she didn't care. But then the noises started. Late at night. Footsteps, dragging sounds, and whispers. You know, the kind of stuff you tell yourself is just the old pipes. But the whispers, those weren't pipes. Claire tried ignoring it, but it got worse. One night she heard knocking. Not loud, but steady, like someone was trying to get her attention. She asked the neighbors. Nobody knew anything. She even went to the landlord, and his face just drained of color. All he could say was, "It's vacant. It's been sealed for years." Now most people would have stopped right there, but not Claire. She couldn't let it go. That night she pressed her ear against the wall, trying to hear what was being said. The whispers stopped. Dead silence. Like whatever was on the other side knew she was listening. She freaked out. Called her friend Matt, told him everything. They decided to break in. I know, bad idea, right? But they were determined. Matt brought a crowbar, and they forced the door open. Inside, dust everywhere. The air was thick, stale, like no one had been in there for years. There was just one chair in the middle of the room, facing the wall. And on it, an old cassette recorder. Claire pressed play, and the voice on that tape, it said, "If you're hearing this, leave. The apartment isn't empty. It never was." That's when the door slammed shut behind them. They tried to open it. Nothing. Then they heard it. Low, guttural whispers getting louder and louder. And something moved in the shadows. They screamed, banged on the door, but no one heard them. By morning, the door was locked tight again. No Claire. No Matt. Just gone. Now here's the thing. People still hear noises from 3C. And sometimes, late at night, if you're really listening, you'll hear it. Let me out. So yeah, next time you hear something weird from the apartment next door, maybe just don't. Some doors, they're better left shut. All right, if you thought that last story was unsettling, wait till you hear this one. Ever given someone a ride only to realize they weren't really there? Let me tell you about Mark and the night he picked up a passenger who left more than just an empty seat behind. So Mark wasn't the kind of guy who believed in ghosts or anything like that. Just a regular guy working late shifts, driving home at odd hours. This one night, though, it all changed. It was pouring rain, and the road was deserted. He was almost home when he spotted someone standing on the side of the road. A woman, drenched, her clothes clinging to her, looking completely lost. Now Mark's the kind of guy who couldn't just drive past. So, he slowed down, rolled down his window, and asked if she needed a ride. She nodded, climbed into the back seat, and gave him an address a few miles away. She didn't say much, just stared out the window, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Mark tried to break the silence, but she barely responded. Still, something about her gave him this uneasy feeling. He kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. She looked pale, too pale. And her clothes? They looked like they belonged in a different decade. But Mark pushed the thoughts aside, blaming the rain and the late hour. They finally pulled up to the address she'd given him, and Mark turned around to let her know they'd arrived. But the back seat was empty. No door sound. No footsteps. She was just gone. Mark sat there for a moment, heart pounding. He even got out of the car, looked around, thinking maybe she slipped out without him noticing. But there was no one. Nothing but rain and an eerie silence. Trying to shake it off, he got back in the car and started driving. That's when it happened. The air in the car turned freezing, and he heard it, soft at first. "You missed my stop." His grip on the wheel tightened. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, but then the whisper came again, right by his ear this time. "You should have left me where you found me." Mark floored it, didn't stop until he reached his driveway. That night he barely slept, trying to convince himself it was just exhaustion. But the next day, curiosity got the better of him. He looked up the address she gave. The house, abandoned for years. The last resident, a woman who died in a car crash on that very stretch of road. Mark doesn't drive that route anymore, and every time he gets in his car, he checks the back seat. Not for safety. No. For that whisper he's sure he'll hear again someday. If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button. There are plenty more where that came from. And trust me, some are even darker.